Hello, anybody out there?
Hi, David. This is Rano, your quiet host in the background. You look and you sound great. I can hear you well.
Thank you. Oops, I forgot to rename myself. Oh. There we go. Yes. That's come on. That's, come on. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Ronald. Can you confirm that the print is showing properly?
Yeah, looks good, Jaylee.
Wonderful. Thank you.
David, she could have stayed and watched the whole budget presentation.
The cat would not be helpful.
Okay.
Plus, he doesn't even have a library card, so.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Beautiful day.
Well, I certainly hope we get a lot of public comments, frankly. I can hope.
Not on a day like this. Everybody's probably at the beach or something.
What am I missing? I don't see. I don't see Commissioner McKenzie or Commissioner Parker. All right, we'll give them a minute or two. I think we're, oh, there we are. I think we're all here. All right. I'm going to call this special meeting to order and we'll call the roll. Commissioner Cahill,
Here.
Commissioner Elkind,
Here?
Commissioner Engbarth,
Here.
Commissioner Heavenridge,
Here.
Commissioner Hauser,
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie,
Here.
Commissioner Parker,
Here.
Commissioner Schneider.
Here.
All right. And pursuant to California Code Section 54953, all votes during this teleconference meeting will be taken by roll call. We also, let's see, here's our little public access. I'm sorry, I'm sure it's right in front of me. The resolution that allows us to hold teleconference meetings. There we go. So I will ask for that after. Do we have any public appearances? Members of the public who wish to address the commission regarding matters not on the agenda should request recognition at this time. Hearing none, then we will move to 4.1, which is the resolution establishing the need to hold teleconference meetings due to a proclaimed state of emergency.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the roll. Commissioner Cahill is a yes. Commissioner Elkind.
Yes.
Commissioner Engbarth was a yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Heavenridge.
Yes.
Commissioner Hauser.
Yes.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes.
Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
Commissioner Schneider.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Then we will move into the 2022-2023 budget discussion items. Thank you all very much for making the time to be here. And let us then move officially into the budget workshop run of show.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. I am Ann Hammond, your library director, and I'm pleased to kick off this budget workshop. I hope you will be as pleased as I am at the depth and quality of information that you will review today. Our Chief Financial Officer, Myrna Lopez, conceived and directed the preparation of this workshop with the assistance of her team in the Budget and Finance Department, our administration staff and our division managers, and our able and supportive consultant, Armando Viramontes. If you're following along in print, this is page 57 of your packet or page 46 of your binder. Next slide, please. This budget previews the hope of a return to a normal operating experience for our staff and our community. We can't look forward without looking back, and it's important to acknowledge the journey up to, through, and hopefully past COVID. In 2019 and 2020, the promise of our Measure Y sales tax was coming true. And when we pivoted in spring 2020, I'm proud to say that our dedicated and creative staff found amazing ways to support and connect with our communities. We also pivoted from the start of a traditional strategic plan to a more innovative and creative and thoughtful approach that we call our Reimagining Plan. Our hours, our services, and our budgets have grown to meet this moment. And I feel optimistic as I look ahead to the 2022-2023 fiscal year. Next slide. Adding Sunday hours is long overdue, and a plan was being developed to open in the 2021-22 fiscal year. But the continued restrictions of the pandemic changed those plans. In 2016, county voters resoundingly approved the Measure Y sales tax, thanks to hundreds of hardworking volunteers, including some of the people in this workshop. Increasing access was a cornerstone of that approval and recognizes that not everyone can come to the library between 10 and 6 on weekdays. When we conducted interviews to create the Reimagining Plan, we also heard a lot about non-traditional ways to access the library. And we're answering that call from increased digital resources to the bibliobus to increased weekend hours. It's also a matter of pride for us. Sonoma County is the crown jewel of Northern California, and it deserves an extraordinary library system that meets the needs of all patrons.
Could I just interrupt to remind people to turn off their microphones? We're hearing some background noise.
Next slide. And as we saw through the Reimagining Plan and the Measure Y expenditure plan, there are a number of common themes here: services to children, improving access, improving our collections, maintaining our aging library facilities. And then from Reimagining Plan, we heard about providing opportunities for everyone to learn and to participate and to collaborate. Supporting community resiliency, which is very important in this particular environment that is environmentally fragile. And fostering equity, social justice, and inclusion are very important for the library and for everyone in the community. Next slide. So Myrna will be leading the workshop, and you will hear presentations from me and from all of our division managers very soon. So now I'm pleased to introduce CFO Myrna Lopez.
Good afternoon. I will switch over to my screen at this time. Okay. Good afternoon. I am really excited to be here before you.
Excuse me, Myrna.
Oh, so sorry.
Could you kindly switch to presenter view?
Am I in presenter view? No?
Not at this time.
Is that better?
Yes,
Better.
thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm really excited to be here in front of you today to present the first budget that I am working on for the Sonoma County Library. I'm very proud and honored to be here with you today. I will provide you an overview of the 2023 proposed budget. The Reimagining Plan set the priorities for the fiscal year of 2023 budget. There are other important elements that were incorporated in formulating the budget, and these include the new allocation of major revenue sources policy recently approved by the Commission, the Measure Y ordinance and expenditure plan, the use of maintenance reserves for facilities and IT, the overhaul of the capital improvement program reserves, new Sunday hours at 11 new branches that will be paid for 100% by Measure Y. And fiscal year 23 also reflects fiscal efficiencies that increase the level of services, recalibrate benefit costs, and reduces the operating deficit under the property tax fund. We continue to be mindful of external factors that impact our revenues and operations overall, such as external factors, economic conditions, natural disasters, and continued COVID-19 variants. We will monitor the budget regularly for any necessary adjustments in response. The total appropriations or expenditures for this budget is $47.9 million. It includes 219.85 full-time equivalent positions. This is approximately 275 people. We have $2.1 million in new revenue and 10 new FTE to accommodate Sunday hours. The next slide are the components of the revenue and expenditures. Here, each column accounts for the different funds: property tax, sales tax, gifts, and donations. A total of those three, and for comparison, the approved adjusted budget for 2022, and a column for the change. Under property tax, the total sources of revenue are $23.9 million, and the total sources is $25 million, and this includes the use of reserves from the fund balance as allowed by the fund balance policy for maintenance and repair of facilities and IT and capital improvement program reserve. On the expenditure side, total expenditures are $26 million, and these expenditures are greater than the total funding sources. Therefore, there is a net impact to the fund balance of $1 million to cover all expenditures under the property tax fund. Over to the sales tax. The total revenue is $15.7 million, and the total sources is $22 million. On the expenditure side, the total expenditures are $22.8 million, and that leaves a positive impact to the fund balance. They say a picture is worth a million words. Here is a graph of the expenditures by people, places, and resources. People comprise the benefits and salaries for our employees for a total of $27.25 million, or 57% of our budget. This includes a $2.2 million increase to accommodate Sunday hours and a pending COLA before the board. It also reflects benefit savings of $1.8 million as a result of recalibrating these costs. Under resources of $14 million of the total budget, or 29%, there is an increase of over $400,000 for services to accommodate Sunday hours, and overall several divisions have been bringing in grants that also allowed to increase resources. Under places, these are our capital projects for a total of $6.73 million, or 14% of our budget. This represents $4.7 million of rebudget. In other words, $4.7 million will be rolled over from the current fiscal year 22 into next year for projects that have been delayed or will be completed next fiscal year. It also represents $1.8 million in new projects. This slide shows the appropriation or expenditures by division. The majority, or 86% of all expenditures, which is over $41 million of our total budget, allocated to the branches for direct services to the community. Public services is 38% of the budget, collections is 13%, facilities is 23%, and this includes capital projects. IT is 10%, that also includes capital projects. Communications is 2% of the budget. Administration is a total of 14% of expenditures, with HR at 7%, executive services at 4%, and budget and finance at 3%. This chart depicts the total financing of our budget. And as you can see, property tax is the greatest with 49% of all funding sources. Sales tax is 32% of all funding sources. And the use of reserves as allowed by the fund balance is 16% of all our sources. Where you see a zero, it means that it's less than 1%. This is the way it was calculated on here. One big difference in this year's budget, for the first time, we are implementing the allocation of major revenue sources policy. The policy calls for calculating the property tax and sales tax percentage of the total tax revenue. And rounded, property tax is 60% and sales tax is 40%. So this ratio is applied to all expenditures under the service-oriented divisions, and with the note, except for Sunday hours, as delineated in the transmittal memo. Here, this is the summary of the allocation ratios for all service areas according to the policy. It will be 60% of expenditures will be allocated to property tax, 40% will be allocated to Measure Y for the service-oriented divisions that include public services, collections, communications, information technology, and facilities. Under administration divisions, executive services, administrative services, budget, and finance are combined. Human resources and fund development, property tax will pick up 90% of the expenditures and Measure Y will pick up 10%. For capital projects, property tax will pick up 10% and Measure Y will pick up 90%. Per the Measure Y expenditure plan, it targets the maintenance of facilities. And this is the revised table that is updated, that clarifies a classification of funds and distinguishes the Sunday hours. So the totals by service area remain the same. I like to illustrate numbers and graphs, and this really captures the allocation ratios discussed in the charts for your review. The fund balance is important to discuss, as well as there is an estimated fund balance available for budgeting. The fund balance is an accumulation over years of budget surpluses. The fund balance policy provides direction on how these funds can be used. And in FY23, the available fund balance under property tax is $7 million. And under sales tax, it's $6.3 million for a grand total of $13.3 million. And this is after fully funding the stabilization fund and the reserves for IT and facilities and the multi-year capital improvement fund. Just to recap on the accomplishments reflected in this budget are the addition of Sunday hours at 11 locations made possible 100% by Measure Y, the implementation of the allocation of major revenue sources policy, and the full implementation of fund balance policy, including the use of maintenance and reserves for facilities, IT resources replacement reserve, IT capital replacement reserve, and vehicle capital replacement reserve that are discussed in the transmittal memo, and the overhauling of the capital improvement program reserves. And finally, there is a reduction in the operations deficit under the property tax fund through the fiscal efficiencies discussed earlier. In closing, I want to remind you of a couple of important dates for this budget. Is that for consideration of the budget adoption or approval, we set aside June 6th, regular commission meeting for that. And we reserved May 2nd to review any open items as a result of this budget workshop, if there are any, at this regular commission meeting. So we will be taking questions at the end of each presenter. So we'll have a few minutes, and then at the end of all of the division presentations, we'll continue to have discussion and questions. So are there any questions?
Myrna, it's Andy. I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Okay.
Now, I'm assuming that big picture questions around the numbers would come to you now rather than specific questions about the divisions, which would go later. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for doing this. Very clear, really impressive, and I appreciate you setting the stage for us. I had a couple of questions. Obviously, one of the big savings projected for next year is the reduction in benefits cost. It looks like we are projecting benefits at about 19% less than what they were budgeted for this year. So I have two questions relating to that. The first may be a little bit unfair because you weren't here last year, but the questions are, how come we were off by so much this year? And more importantly, how confident are you that the lower benefits number that you're projecting for next year is actually one we can rely on? Okay.
Fair question, Commissioner Elkin. I really appreciate that. We did spend some time on this. CalPERS is our benefits provider, and those final numbers come to the library in the fall. So the general practice in budgeting is to use actuals. If you can remember, when looking at our monthly expenditure reports for the current year, FY22, there's a consistent savings under the benefits line item. And so benefits in fiscal year 22 were over budgeted. Benefits are not the easiest to, nail down. And as you know, it was a transition year in the fiscal year 22 in developing the budget. So I believe that the best intentions were used to try to make sure that there was enough funding in the benefits. So benefits were budgeted close to 40%. Looking at it closely at actuals, it is much less than that. And so I relied on, best practice over a few years trend as to the actual percentage of benefits for the library. And so that is how I recalibrated the benefits. To be prudent, I will continue to follow CalPERS governing board, and they do look at preliminary numbers in the summer, and then with final costs in the fall. That coincides with our mid-year review, that we can review all of our budget revenues and expenditures to make sure that we have enough funding and we're covering. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, but I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you feel pretty confident that last year it was just we over budgeted, and what you're presenting is a realistic number you feel like we can rely on. Okay. Okay. Another question, this is a small one, and I think just exposes my ignorance. I was really happy to see what you're doing with establishing reserve funds for the major facilities maintenance resources, the IT resources replacement, and the IT capital replacement. I was just a little unclear on the difference between the two IT funds. It looks like the IT resources replacement is for items that are under $5,000, and the IT capital replacement reserve is for assets over 5,000. Is that the only difference?
Yes, that is the only difference. For auditing purposes, it is important to separate the two types of assets so that we capitalize those that are able to capitalize, which are $5,000 or greater. So yes, you're right.
Great. Okay. That was it on the big picture questions. I had other questions that were specific to the divisions, and I'll just hold them. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Yeah, Myrna, this is Fred Ingbarth. I was wondering, could you explain on page 54 of the packet that was sent out to the commissioners, this net impact on fund balance, the $1 million that shows as being short? I was wondering, do you know what was the cause of that, or could we do anything to lower that amount?
Very, very good question. As you can see, there's a few things happening here. Is that really fiscal year 22, over the last couple of fiscal years, because of the pandemic, the library had to reduce hours and programs, and so it created a spike in fund balance. And over the last couple of years, the library has building back those programs. In the current year, fiscal year 22 was primarily one of them, where over $3 million of fund balance. So instead of the 1 million, you would see $3 million there. To close the gap between expenditures and resources. So the intent was to build back programs for the library. And so operations are, it really is that, it is an operations in expenditures that is causing this. My intent, if this is the desire of the board, is to continue to monitor this and close it without having to reduce services. So that is what's happening there. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, thank you.
We have Commissioner McKenzie.
Thank you. CFO Lopez, I'm applauding you. This is the kind of budget presentation that we have been thirsting for several years. I'm really, really impressed of the way you've laid it out. It's clear and it's beautifully presented. And I thank you, first of all, heartily for that, because you've just done a great job. I want to comment just a bit on the fund balance policy. It's page 62 in our binder. And again, thank you for fully realizing the fund balance policy. We've talked about the fund balance policy in a number of our finance committee meetings over this past year, and you have addressed all of our concerns and again, put aside money in these reserves, and as far as I can tell, it's in full compliance with our policy. And so this is just a great document to have. Pointing out, as you did at the bottom, we do have a significant fund balance in both property tax and sales tax that's available for budgeting. And I guess we've begun a conversation about further paying down our liabilities, our CalPERS and our OPEB. And I just wanted to point out to the commission and ask you if you had any additional remarks about potential use of some of this fund balance toward paying down liabilities in this coming year. That's one of my questions. And I had another question.
Okay. Regarding the fund balance, it is there, to use according to the fund balance policy that you have. And my understanding it is the desire of the commission on how the commission would like to prioritize the use of these funds. So I know that the commission has looked at a few important priorities that include the outstanding long-term liabilities, also the master facilities plan, and also the lease for the support center is up next year. So looking at those options, and at least from my limited experience in working with you all over the last few months, those have been the ones that would require large investments, and therefore it's up to the commission to determine how to allocate those funds, if at all, given those priorities. So I think all of those things, including the long-term liability, are a fine use of the available fund balance.
Great. Thank you for that. I just kind of wanted to air that out in case the public is watching, the kind of conversations that we're going to be having further on this budget. And my second question is, I think it's along the lines of what Commissioner Elkine was asking, but on page 63, reducing operations deficit through fiscal efficiencies. I wasn't real clear on what those fiscal efficiencies were, and wondered if you could give us a little more detail about that. I might have just missed something in your presentation.
Some of them were explicit in terms of the review of the benefits, which, as you can see, was a significant savings of $1.8 million. So, of course, that would have impact on both funds. But of course, the one that benefits the most is the property tax. Others include that the administration wanted to keep expenditures flat as much as possible. Of course, there's always costs of doing business, but the direction to the division managers was to keep a flat budget. And no new expenditures. So really, the new expenditures in this budget were contained to requirements and Measure Y, extended weekend hours.
So no real efficiencies, really kind of a correction in the allowance for benefits, and then not adding any new costs. And keeping the budget flat, rather than
and I guess the other last thing is the full implementation of the fund balance also is critical. Those we just haven't fully implemented the fund balance, but the fund balance allowed for what I'm calling efficiencies. These are best practices. All of those above are best practices, and they are efficiencies in budgeting.
Great. Thank you for that.
Any other larger questions for Myrna? Okay.
Okay, so next is a presentation into our by division, starting with Executive Services and our Director, Ann Hammond.
Thank you, Myrna. We're going to go back to the other screen. Is that correct, Jaylene?
Yes, Myrna, if you could stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Okay. And now welcome to our fiscal year 2022-23 division level budget presentations, beginning with Executive Services. Next page, next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please?
A little bit of technical difficulties. 1 second. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So as library director for Sonoma County Library, I have overall responsibility for the strategic direction of our system of 15 locations and almost 300 staff, serving 550,000 people countywide. Joining me today are Deputy Director Erica Thibault, who is responsible for the operational management of our services to the public, and Development Manager Craig Palmer, who's responsible for raising private funds to supplement our public revenues. And we're also very grateful for the invaluable support of Director's Assistant Jaylene Demapun and the currently vacant Commission Assistant position formerly filled by Jen Swenson. Next slide. All right, so as you'll see, the budget for staff for this division is slightly lower this year, and that's due to the benefits correction that we've been discussing. There are no capital expenses that are charged to this division, and our services and supplies budget remains the same as last year. Next slide. So what's new this year? In the past year, we began to implement some of the many goals of our Reimagining Plan, even while navigating through the restrictions of the pandemic. As we've discussed previously, we greatly expanded our digital and online materials and services when that was all we could offer. Now that we're emerging into a post-COVID world, we're committed to a both-and approach to library services. Our patrons want access to the library when and how they choose, and that's what we will continue to provide, robust technological solutions as well as excellent in-person services. Two of the most exciting in-person opportunities for us this year include working with the city of Santa Rosa to design a 21st century library for Roseland, Southwest Santa Rosa, and opening all of our regional libraries for Sunday service. Next slide. Deputy Director Thibault will tell you about our Sunday plans. Oh, we can't hear you, Erica.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Next year, we will focus on implementing the goals of our Reimagining Plan and delivering on the promises of Measure Y. Equity, opportunity, and resiliency are the backbone of our Reimagining Plan. The center of these overlapping promises and goals is access. No matter who you are, where you are, the library is committed to serving you. Last year, Director Hammond announced that we will open all of our regional libraries on Sundays, 4 hours from 1 to 5 p.m. We have analyzed our staffing needs as well as the costs, and we believe that hiring a total of 10 FTE will enable us to meet this goal. Positions will be spread across the entire library system and includes 2.5 librarians, 3.5 library associates, 1 supervising library specialist, and 3 library specialists. In total, it's 10 FTE, but it's 19 new positions. Although we are only expanding our hours by 4%, This is a 10% increase in staff, and it will give existing staff time during the rest of the week for outreach and programming. Hiring for the needed positions will begin as soon as our budget is approved. We anticipate that it will take approximately 8 to 10 weeks to recruit, hire, and train these new staff in support of Sunday hours. We hope to begin training the new employees in mid-August in order to have them onboarded to provide service in September. Next up, Fund Development Manager Craig Palmer will talk about our fundraising campaign and goals. Next slide, please.
Erica, thank you. And thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners, staff. Since 1991, when the Sonoma County Public Library Foundation received its official 501c3 designation from the IRS, the Sonoma County Library has been fortunate to have the foundation as its own independent, dedicated fundraising partner. Its mission is to the point to provide funding to ensure equitable access to Sonoma County Library services. The times have evolved a lot since 1991, and the need for funding in this new age of the 21st century library and the need for expanded services to the community has also increased the need for more contributions to add to other revenue sources. An example of that need is illustrated by the Roseland Southwest Santa Rosa Regional Library Project, where as much as $10 million may be needed to complete the project. To the foundation's great credit, its board has seized this challenge as a way to significantly strengthen its own capacity to raise significant dollars, first to help close the funding gap for the Roseland project, but also to be ready to help out in other jurisdictions where needed. In the past 3 months, board members of the foundation have been fiercely focused, working diligently on 4 things to rise to this task and to build confidence that these funds can be raised. An energetic nominating committee has completed an analysis of exactly what kind of board it needs to build, with capacity to do that fundraising and reflecting the diversity of the county it serves culturally and geographically. In mid-April, that nominating committee will convene a special meeting inviting select community leaders to give suggestions of candidates to build that board. Job 1, meanwhile, for all of us is prospect development. And the foundation, community advocates, community groups, and the Sonoma County Library staff are all working together to develop prospect pools needed at every level of the donor tree: high net worth, mid-range, and the smaller but every bit as essential personal gifts made by the broad general public. Meanwhile, led by Treasurer Judy Glenn, working with Sonoma County Library staff, we're taking steps to modernize and streamline donor management systems, best practice fiscal procedures, ensuring that all donors and their contributions will be properly stewarded, and that all procedures related to managing the contributed funds will be impeccable. And finally, plans have now been made for the foundation to kick off in mid-May a series of select donor cultivation events, potentially to be held once a month through December, so we can bring together and build relationships and with select prospects from our pool and members of the Sonoma County Library staff. That includes commissioners, foundation members, friends groups are getting involved, staff, and volunteers. Given the drive and dedication of the foundation, the goodwill their efforts are engendering, the extraordinary merit of the project itself as one of the county's most inspiring and innovative visions, and the potential broad appeal in the community, these funds can be raised. Not at all to take any of it for granted. It's a daunting rise in front of us. There's much hard work to be done. But I know the foundation's goal is to ultimately engage everyone in this historic opportunity, knowing that together, eyes open to the challenge, we can build the team, the all-star team, to take this on, this barn raising, and succeed. Thank you. Ann?
Thanks. Next slide. And the 3 of us are available for questions. Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for your presentations. Quick question to Deputy Director Thibault. Does the staffing required for Sunday, does that imply that the full staffing study that I believe you were working on for the whole library that has been completed?
Unfortunately, no. The staffing study will actually provide us with a number of recommendations, including the Sunday hours. But because of the timing, we're not going to be able to complete that by the time the budget is due. So,
okay. So this was just focusing, primarily on the Sunday needs only. Okay. And then I think originally, we were thinking when we first started talking about this budget year, we were talking about July for Sunday, but we're talking about September now, and that's a pretty firm date, or?
Well, we wanted to make sure that we had the approval of the commission for this before we started the recruiting process, and the recruiting process takes some time. So, with the expectation that the budget would be approved in June, we would, post those positions then, and it would take us, 8 to 10 weeks from mid-June to get everybody hired and trained.
Yeah.
So that's why September is what we're expecting.
Right. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Commissioner Elkin.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question for Craig. Really happy to see the great work that you and the foundation have been doing, and I feel it's super important. It may be a little outside the scope of this meeting, but I'm wondering if you could just take a moment. You kind of alluded to the fact that the funding picture has changed over the last few years. And if you would just speak a little bit to what the conditions are that make it essential that we both work hard to renew Measure Y and launch this, serious focused effort to raise private funds in the current environment. I'd appreciate it.
Commissioner Elkin, thank you for that. And I'm able to better answer that question as a result of the conversation we had at the last commission meeting. 2 or 3 factors. There was a time when the Sonoma County Library was, let's just say, poor. Then along came Measure Y funds that put us in better touch with the community, to also learn that, frankly, more services were needed even than we were maybe able to provide at the time. At the time, there was discretionary funds around with various jurisdictions that since have dried up. And now the need for services in the community has expanded in such that they look to the library to provide, that we now need these additional funds to add on to the tax money and the Measure Y money to complete the funding picture to provide those expanded services.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that's just as a comment, I think that's a case we're going to have to continue to make so that, our supporters and the public more generally understand the need and how we're looking at a balanced approach to meeting it. So thanks for your work there.
Well, thanks for underlying that. We'll be sure to do that.
Commissioner Ingbarth.
Yes, I have a few questions. One was related to this part of the, what I noticed it's a theme throughout in each of the presentations, but is the people, it's a lump sum. And I was wondering whether we could provide or have a breakdown of the salaries of each of the people that are referred to in each of these presentations, if that would be available to look at. And then if it would be available for the public to have access to as well.
That is public knowledge. It's we're government employees of a sort, and so all of that information is readily available, and we can provide it as requested.
Is it on the website somewhere that somebody could just go to the website and look it up without having to make a public records request?
I don't know that it's on the website, but we can provide that. Yes.
It is available on the Transparent California website. You can search by position, and all of the salary information is available there.
Oh, good. So could a reference to that site be put on our website so that somebody, because this has come up in a couple of my meetings on the budget, and I thought I would pursue it. That could that website, could there be a reference of that on our website so somebody who's interested in that knows where to look?
Perhaps we
Yeah.
could take that up in the finance committee meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I know these are just questions. I mean, just
Thanks.
the other thing with Craig is I'm wondering whether we've looked at the scope of the fundraising in terms of who or what our library services are going to. So, for example, I mean, if we're doing fundraising and the money might be going to the development of a cultural center in addition to the library, are we looking at cost recovery for any of your services or any of the services from the Library Commission to help do the fundraising?
Commissioner Engbar, thanks for that question. Let me just say the first thing is, to my knowledge, the fundraising we're doing is only dedicated to Roseland. It won't be used in any way with any other project that might be involved, even on the same site where the library is. In terms of cost recovery, I'm not sure that I can actually give a good answer at this very moment. It's not unusual that in some worlds, capital campaigns are self-funded. So, for example, sometimes part of a budget of a capital campaign has to do with some allocated expenses to some of the other charges involved, like some of the staff expenses, but I'm not privy to how that might be done here.
Yeah, I'm wondering, since you're looking into best practices and as an aspect of what you're doing with your work, I'm wondering whether between you and Myrna, you could take a look at that. I know that in San Diego, their city library and their foundation, they had a little bit of a problem as far as not covering cost expenses, and it popped up in one of their audits that they needed to make that adjustment. And I thought, in terms of getting ahead of the game, since we're just getting into it, it might be good to look at that, and then at some point to have a cost recovery policy presented to the board for approval.
Commissioner, I think that is really, really important. And I'm sure that between Myrna and Ann and I, we can do something with that to get back to you.
Okay, that's great. Now, the other thing is, just so that, I mean, we talk a lot about Roseland, but we're also talking about, for example, if the city of Sebastopol or the city of Healdsburg wanted to make use of your services for fundraising, is that something that we're envisioning in the format of what you're planning on doing? Because we talk a lot about Roseland, but there are other needs out there and other branches that might also be looking for to benefit from your services.
Commissioner, what I can tell you is the person that knows the best answer to that question is the library director, who is my supervisor.
Right.
But I can also tell you, at least from my standpoint, at my lower pay grade, that I'm a fundraising resource. And by the way, I love fundraising, and I love to be able to meet with people to help them find the higher road. I'm already working with, for example, the Santa Rosa Friends Group to help them do some things. And relative to the ability to prioritize time, we want a rising tide to raise all ships.
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
well, that'll be good. I'd like to maybe have you and Ann work out something so we have an idea of what we could say to our respective groups.
Yeah.
In terms of if they, I know for example, Sebastopol's been talking for years about trying to get some funding to help. The city has been about getting some funding to help get that library either reinvent it or relocate it or redeveloped in some way. And there's been a community group, the Lantern, that's formed, but they've not had the benefit of someone like you to provide them with advice and suggestions on how to
I'm aware of that.
conduct an effective campaign. So I'm thinking that you'd be a good resource, and I know you're doing a great job. So I just think in terms of spreading your benefits around, it would be nice to know that that's something we could do.
Thanks very much. I think it's with the success of Roseland, that is probably going to inspire other communities to know that they can work together and do more and work with the library. I think this is going to be a very interesting project for many people in Sonoma County. But let's move on.
Well,
Anne, do you want to take it away? I don't see any other hands up, so we're going to hand it back to Anne.
All right, thank you. And the next presentation will be Communications Manager Ray Holley. And go ahead, Ray.
Thank you, Director Hammond. Good afternoon, Chair Doyle and Commissioners. I'm Ray Holley, your Communications Manager. The Communications Division provides a wealth of services to the library. Our job is to engage the community about the benefits, the impacts, and the magic of libraries. Next slide, please. Our small but mighty communications team tells our library story to the world. A key way we do that is to act as an in-house group of consultants and boosters in communications, public relations, advocacy, public information, graphics, video, signage, marketing, advertising, and other support to library staff and library supporters. This includes newspaper and radio ads, posters, brochures, media relations, email newsletters, social media, and signs and banner programs. Your library marketers handle all primary press outreach, and we are all former journalists, so we know how to communicate with the media and help reporters do their jobs. We handle primary systems social media accounts, plus our email marketing program. Our graphic designers are professional artists with decades of experience. Next slide, please. And we help our community appreciate the power of libraries. In addition to all aspects of marketing, our team is the library's voice in the media, at local government meetings, and anywhere we need to be to represent the interests of the library and the community we serve. We're deeply committed to equity and access, and whenever we can, we assist and support library teams and programming that are focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion. After all, libraries are for everyone. Next slide, please. While we use library funds for signage, printing, advertising, and other forms of communications, our strength is our team of professional writers, marketers, and designers. A key point about our team is that we are all about the library as a system. To us, the Sonoma County Library is not a loose affiliation of 15 public facilities. We're a single library system with 15 locations, and that's how we approach the support we provide to each other. We can and do help staff one-on-one. Any staff member who wants to work with a professional writer, marketer, or experienced graphic designer is always welcome at our door. We're here to make everyone else's job easier. In this fiscal year, our division budget totals $976,204. And like other divisions, our budget will be flat in fiscal year 22-23. Next slide, please. As I've been saying, our team supports every aspect of library services. There's almost nothing we don't touch, from payroll forms to new service branding, to outdoor banners to public affairs. This year, we will complete a multi-division approach to library signage. When we look at our patron behavior patterns, we realize that Sonoma County Library patrons, while they're all loyal to one branch, they travel to others as well. And serving those patrons, requires us to be visually consistent and familiar from branch to branch. Consistent and effective signage is a strong recommendation coming out of our new facilities master plan, and that we will implement this coming year, including new monument signs as various libraries are being refreshed. We're also reaching out, learning, and being humble as we continually work to make our communications more accessible, more effective, and more inclusive. Next slide. We also inform the community about library services. That's really our core mission. Increasing hours is a cornerstone of the promises we made to the community when voters passed Measure Y. Sunday hours have been identified by our supporters and our staff as a significant opportunity to increase access to the library. However, Sundays won't be effective if no one knows we're open. So we're planning media outreach, advertising, signage, and more to support this goal. Next slide. Community-informed communications and marketing is key to our success, and it goes beyond picking the right radio station or designing a clever logo, although we do that too. The communications team is all in on Roseland, and we are part of maintaining and expanding library services in that vital and fast-growing community. From promoting the temporary branch at 470 Sebastopol Road to working closely with local and regional government partners to fund and envision the next library on Hearn Avenue, our team is committed to keeping the promise of Measure Y sales tax and supporting our reimagining effort to build a 21st century library. Next slide. Improving access to local libraries is a key goal that you hear again and again this afternoon. As we wisely and prudently use the Measure Y sales tax revenue, our messaging is welcoming by design and inclusive by intention. We want everyone to picture themselves at our libraries. Next slide. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take questions, comments. I see Commissioner Elkins.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ray. And thanks to you and your team for the consistently great work you do. My question was just about a budget number. I saw that in the people component, you're actually lower than you were last year, looked like about 92%. I'm assuming and hoping that only reflects lower benefit costs and not, in fact, a reduction in staffing. Is that the case?
That is correct. It's the recalculation to normalize the benefit costs.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes, I wanted to thank you for your presentation, Ray, and to commend you. I've been on the commission now 8 years, and the difference between 8 years ago and now is just enormous in terms of getting the word out, the professionalism, all the things that you and your team do. It's just really, really impressive. And the other day I was driving down to our library and I was behind a bus and I looked up and it said Sonoma County Library advertising across the back of the bus. And I just felt like, library world, it's all around the place. And so I just, I just see a lot more about the library and all the things that we do. And that's been, I think, one of our biggest issues in the past is that we have all of this going on. We're spending a lot of money on lots of new things and people just need to know about it. And I think you and your team are doing a great job with all the ways you're getting the word out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. If there are no more questions, Commissioner Elkin, your hand is still up. Is that an artifact? It is. No more questions. I'm pleased to introduce our Collection Services Division Manager, Jamie Anderson.
All right, thank you, Ray. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Jamie Anderson, Division Manager of Collection Services. I've been with the library since 2005, and I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit about collections today. Next slide, please. Thanks. So who we are and what we do in Collection Services. The Collection Services Division selects and acquires a robust collection for the community to enjoy, supporting all ages and all formats. Our collection includes not only books, audiobooks, and DVDs, but all variety of research databases, streaming media, digital magazines, ebooks, and more. As you heard at the beginning of the budget workshop and in the budget memo that was at the beginning of the packet, Our circulation of digital materials is exponentially growing. We have an extensive Spanish language collection as well as materials in other non-English languages. And we also support a unique group of special collections that contain materials of local and historic value, many of which have been digitized. The collection services staff is responsible for the bibliographic data in our online catalog, so people can easily search and find what they're looking for. For materials not available in our catalog, we do provide a service called Linkplus, which hopefully many of you are familiar with and perhaps have used. Linkplus allows users to borrow titles from other libraries throughout the state. It gives us access to basically another 9 million titles through the collections of over 70 participating libraries, both public and academic libraries. In fact, we learned recently that a pretty large consortium in Southern California, about 10 libraries, is going to be joining Linkplus soon, which will only benefit our patrons even more. Through Linkplus, we also lend our materials out to other libraries if we have something in our collection that a patron from one of the member libraries would like, since it's a reciprocal service. Next slide, please. So our budget, collection services has 21 employees across 5 different departments. We have an acquisitions department, cataloging department, processing department, collection development department, and Linkplus, or resource sharing department. So we have all different levels of staff: librarians, library associates, library specialists, and library aides. Our budget for people this next year is going to be $2,314,678. You'll notice we don't have a budgeted amount for places. Collection services staff plays a supporting role in many branch refresh projects, capital projects. For example, we purchased the startup collection for the Bibliobus. We worked on the inventory and the reshelving of the archival collection last summer when it moved to a new location. And we're currently involved in the Guerneville refresh project. All these items are budgeted for in other lines and other divisions. Under the bucket of resources, the 22-23 requested budget amount is $4,197,632. Just slightly higher than last fiscal year. Most of this is for our books and materials, about 95% of it. And the remainder is for Linkplus and supplies that we use to process the collection. So total budget request for collection services for 2023 is at the bottom there, $6,512,310. And the next slide, please. Okay, what's new this year? As it was outlined in the budget memo, we added a large number of new e-resources this year. Some of our newer resources include online newspapers, such as the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, and the New York Times, and Quello Concerts, which is a really neat streaming platform of full-length musical concerts and music documentaries. Also, I'm really proud of our local digital collections, which have continued to expand this past year. New resources that we added in the last 12 months include submissions that we received through the Sonoma Response Project, as well as the Sonoma Sounds Project. Sonoma County Grand Jury reports have all been digitized and mounted on our digital collections site. Sonoma County Commission on AIDS records, and a historical photo map viewer, which allows users to take a look at photos through their locations using GIS data and to view those locations over time from 1942 through 2018. So as we look to next fiscal year, we're mostly going to be maintaining our current collection levels and e-resources. If budget allows, we'd love to be able to add Fiscal, which is similar to Spotify, a product that would allow library users to download and stream songs, albums, and create playlists of music. Next slide. So the Reimagining Plan states that we will expand information access, empower lifelong learning, offer bilingual resources, and foster inclusion for everyone. Our collections are a big part of what help us achieve all of these goals. One area of special focus that I would highlight are our efforts to increase the diversity of our collections. And there's several pieces to this. There's what we're buying, there's what we're withdrawing from the collection, and there's how we're marketing and promoting the collection. So we're kind of tackling it from all three prongs. This year, we also created a diversity strategy with specific targets to meet. Every book order that our selectors put through is audited for diversity. This year, we added Make Make, which is a Spanish-based interface of Spanish language ebooks for children. This platform was developed in Colombia. We also added an e-resource called Press Reader, which provides access to more than 7,000 digital newspapers and magazines from around the world in 60 different languages. So, as I'm sure everyone on this call is aware, our world continues to be saturated with misinformation, and it's really vital that our community knows they can turn to the library as a trusted source for information, not only accurate information, but from a variety of different sources, as well as trusting that we're going to have a collection that reflects a wide array of people, cultures, and experiences. Next slide. Okay, Measure Y. So Measure Y's expenditure plan calls on us to maintain book material and digital collections. We're doing that. In addition to substantially building up our online resources, we have continued to maintain strong core book collections. We focus primarily on current and popular materials as a public library. Our collections are also somewhat tailored to meet the needs of each community, including local history and local government documents. Measure Y funding has also allowed us to expand into some new media formats that I wanted to talk about, which we otherwise really would not have been able to without this funding. One example are playaways. These are portable media players that are preloaded with an audiobook. They're a little bit old school, but they've been pretty popular since we launched them. They can fit into your pocket. They're great for on the go if you're out taking the jog or traveling or whatnot. We added video games for children, teen, and adults to meet the needs of the gamers in our community. Juvenile book and media sets have also been added at all branches. If you're not familiar with these, they are picture books with accompanying narration on audio because we really know that read aloud books help beginning readers to improve their comprehension and their word recognition. And then DVD binge boxes. During the pandemic, we added the DVD binge boxes. They are sets of 4 to 6 movies that can be checked out as a single item. These were pretty popular during the shelter in place and during our curbside service. Since receiving Measure Y funds, we've also increased the checkout limits for our most popular e-resources, which are Hoopla, Overdrive, and Canopy, to allow as much access as possible within budget. We also maintain a holds to copy ratio of 4:1 for all formats. This means for every 4 holds, we have at least 1 copy. We look at this ratio every 2 weeks and buy additional copies to recalibrate to the 4:1 ratio biweekly. And just for context, prior to Measure Y funding, our holds to copy ratio was 7:1. So it's quite a difference from those days. The wait time for a 7:1 ratio compared to a 4:1 ratio is significant. Next slide, please. So we have come to the end of my presentation. To conclude, Collection Services provides materials that meet the needs and interests of the community, and we support public services in all of their projects. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Elkin.
Thank you. Jamie, thanks very much. First of all, I just wanted to acknowledge and congratulate you on your tenure with the library. Obviously, you bring a lot of experience and expertise to your role, and very grateful for that. I have a few questions. I'll start with the simplest. It's kind of the same question I asked Ray a moment ago. I'm looking at, the the people component of the budget, I see it's a little bit lower than it was last year. I'm assuming that's due to the benefit savings. Is that right?
Yes, I think you'll probably find that across the board as we go through these presentations. My staff is not being cut. It's the same.
Okay, I did see it in several departments. I didn't see it in all, but I just wanted to be sure that was the case. Okay. Then I was just curious, understand that, you and the team have both maintained our kind of print resources and expanded e-resources. Just curious, of the budget that we have for resources, roughly what's the percentage allocation between print and e-resources currently, and how has that changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, great question. In our current year, we are spending 55% of our materials budget on e-resources. The other 45% is all of our tangible materials. Last fiscal year, it was probably more like 40% on e-resources. So we have definitely ratcheted up the e-resources to meet that growing demand.
I think that's great and appropriate. And finally, forgive this last question. There's no implication here. I'm not a library professional, but I feel like I have to ask. I'm looking at the percentage of costs between staff and resources. And I understand that there's two extremes that we would want to avoid, right? I mean, we could have no staff and just spend all the money on resources and we'd end up with a jumbled mess. Or we could have an enormous number of staff selecting a very small number of highly coveted resources. That doesn't seem right either. I guess my question is, the allocation of money, staff to resources seems a little bit high to me, just as an outsider. I'm wondering, are there any benchmarks or sort of best practices that guide this? And as you look at it, do you see any opportunities for efficiencies that would enable us to devote a little higher percentage of the total resources to materials rather than to staff?
Okay, let me give that a little thought. So a few points, and I see Erica has her hand up too. Perhaps she wants to respond. We're already taking advantage of some efficiencies in terms of we have partnerships with various vendors that we use to help us catalog and process our materials according to our local specifications. Because we have our special collections as a growing and important part of our overall collection, that requires a certain amount of customized attention and special skills. We have a centralized operation here, meaning our collection development team, which is a group of 5 librarians that work out of headquarters. They are selecting all the new and forthcoming titles for the entire system. That work used to be decentralized in the branches, and we had 40 to 60 librarians across all the branches reading the same reviews and deciding whether they wanted to buy such and such title. That's all been centralized several years back. Those are just a few of my immediate thoughts. Of course, I would always love to have a higher materials budget rather than, that's the way I would adjust the numbers if we were to make changes in that ratio between people and resources. In my experience, most libraries have about a 10 to 12% of their overall operating budget dedicated to materials, and I think we're in that zone.
Perhaps we should hear from Erica then before we take additional questions from the commission.
If it might be helpful, we could analyze the cost per capita, which is a typical way that libraries break down their budgets. So generally, libraries operate on a spectrum of between $2 and $11 per capita per, for our materials collections. I don't know where Sonoma County Library sits in that spectrum, but we can certainly get that information for you and do some comparisons to other library systems so that you can kind of see, at the high end is $11, at the low end is $2. Like I said, I don't know where we are, but a good rule of thumb is about $8, per capita. And we can look into that and have that information for you in the May meeting, if that would be helpful.
Super. Commissioner Angbar's hand was up first, and then we'll go to Commissioner Parker.
I have three questions or three areas I'd like to ask you about that are sort of lumped together. First off, I want to follow Andy and the other people that have mentioned it, that I think the collections division, and you guys are doing an outstanding job. I've always felt that our library has been very up to date and very responsive in accessing information. So I thank you guys a lot for that. I'm wondering about three things. VR is becoming popular, and I'm wondering whether you and the technology folks have talked about developing any programs to make VR programs available to patrons. Along the lines of that would be the metaverse, which is also starting to pick up, and wondering what you've may have looked at in terms of that. And then the third thing, and this is the end of the things I was curious about, is things like the Digital Humanities. Is that something we're looking at, or is that something that we would do in collaboration with Sonoma State to make resources such as that available to patrons? That's it.
Okay. I know pre-pandemic we already, had done some programming around VR. I am not familiar with what you mean by Digital Humanities in terms of the public library. And I see Mike has his hand up as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, as far as the VR, we were just kicking off several different VR programs prior to the pandemic. We worked with an outside agency to acquire 3 full VR setups that were distributed amongst our branches. And then we were just about to unveil mobile VR Oculus Quest units at every single library regional branch. Of course, then the pandemic hit and we've really scaled that back. After that, we get back in person, we're going to be rolling those out and working with public services to unveil programming based around VR and sharing. We're not quite there with sharing headsets on between people on their faces, but we're getting there. So we are very anxious to get back into VR as we get more back into the public.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Parker, and I'm sure that the rest of the commission knows that VR is virtual reality. Commissioner Parker, go for it.
Hi, thank you very much. I stopped in at Park Branch last week, and I think when people think libraries, they think collections, and I think that the branch is doing a terrific job with the collection overall. Because we are lucky enough or challenged enough, whichever you want to slice that pie, to have so much of a Spanish language presence, I'm just wondering what your team, the Spanish language, and then maybe other language specialties that your team represents.
That my team represents, or that we have represented in the collection?
No, I mean your staff.
Okay. Tell me if I'm not answering your question here, but I have one bilingual staff member who purchases new materials for the Spanish collection, and she's fluent in Spanish. She also purchases for the rest of our world language collection, everything from French to Vietnamese.
And that seems like she's probably got a very large plate in front of her. Do you expect you can add to that staffing load, or add more to your staff that are bilingual?
I did not ask for more staff this coming year because we were all asked to retain a flat budget. It would be wonderful to have more bilingual staff, absolutely.
I see Erica has her hands up. Perhaps she's got something to add.
Generally, in library systems where you have multiple language skills, if you don't have somebody in the acquisitions department who selects for those materials, you might have a bilingual staff who maybe works in a branch who is the selector, who is able to research and provide recommendations to collection services. I don't think that Sonoma County has any selectors who work outside of collection services. But, if we were to get other bilingual staff in languages other than Spanish, then we would certainly draw upon those skills.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Schneider.
Thanks. I just wanted to second the point about generally assessing collection on a per capita basis. That's kind of across the field. And but I did have a question about benchmarking in general that I think is applicable to this conversation, which is, do we contribute data to any of the national data sets such as benchmark, the replacement to PLDS?
We do. We contribute to the PLA benchmark studies.
Thank you. And I just want to note that digital humanities is really it's an area of scholarly activity for computing and digital technologies and the humanities, and it might not be typical for a public library to wade into that. Even at Sonoma State, where we're more of a teaching and learning institution, there's not really a big digital humanities footprint, just hasn't got there yet. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Jamie, for all you do. Excellent report to us. I'm not sure I've formulated this question exactly well, but I'm always finding new things. And just today, a few minutes ago, I heard you talk about LO concerts by Stingray, which of course I've never heard of. This is obviously related to the marketing department and so forth, but do we have a way of knowing how people find out about our new offerings, and if they see them on the website and then discover them, or how much, through the library and the library staff talking things up, or, how can we, and then in terms of measuring and watching how these things take off and how they can be, amplified, or when we decide that nobody's using them because they don't know about them, or I don't know what my question is, but just we have so many things now, so many new things, and we're adding them all the time. And, it's just so much more complicated than books used to be. So if you can make any sense of that question, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I could try. So for every new resource that we roll out, we typically would have a splash on our homepage. We would typically have a press release, social media, a variety of ways that we try to get the word out. But as you noted, and I agree, it's difficult because we're constantly rolling new things out, and we're kind of saturating that all the time. We also keep on our homepage kind of a running list of all the latest new resources that we've added. So for people that don't come around very often, that's kind of tracked there. It usually goes back at least 12 months. So that's a place that can be checked. We definitely do monitor the usage closely. We look at the stats on all of our e-resources monthly. And then once a year, we have sort of a bigger effort where we evaluate and look at all of them across the board and decide if any, cost per use are not really pulling their weight, whether we need to just promote them better, or whether we want to consider dropping them so that we can bring something else in. And Ray might have other comments about how we promote things, but it's difficult to say how patrons discover and learn about our new resources, unless they mention that to us. I'm not sure how we would necessarily know.
Ray, did you want to add something to
Certainly. As Jamie said, we we basically launch an outreach campaign for every new resource, and that includes books. We have a new and noteworthy that we do fairly regularly. There is a point of diminishing returns. All of us are on multiple email lists. And I'll tell you, if we email somebody more than once a week, then our unsubscribes start to go up. So it's pretty easy to do the math. We can market 52 things a year if we're sending something out once a week. So we create, as Jamie said, a campaign. There's often a home slide, social media slides. We're now, if you count YouTube and we're now diversified into 5 different social media platforms so that we can try to reach different people in different ways. We send out a press release. If you note the publicity packets in your monthly commission meeting, you'll see that we're getting anywhere from 25 to 60 publicity hits per month. We're sending out 52 press releases a year as well. So we're not getting the pickup that we used to as the traditional media continues to contract. So we're always looking for new ways to do this. And we are experimenting with combining things. We have to remarket things at times. It's great to market the New York Times when you get it on board, and then the Washington Post when you get it on board, but you can't expect everyone to remember that. So we recently remarketed Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal as a package. So we're always juggling and trying to fit that in. Kathy DeWeese manages the the complicated home slide schedule on the website. The IT team is great with running to keep up with us all the time. But it's always a juggling act, and you're right, there's a lot of wonderful things happening.
If there's some highlights, we can certainly try to present them when we talk to our own city councils or county supervisors or that sort of thing. So if you would perhaps give us highlights occasionally, we would be delighted to help spread the word. That's part of our job. Commissioner Heavenridge.
Yes, Jamie, once again, great job. It's been, I've been around long enough to see what a challenge it's been over the years for you. So I'm glad you're still here. My question is about the history and genealogical library, and how do you acquire material for that? I mean, is that something a percentage of the budget, or is that all just our community giving material to it, or how do you get more information for that? And if people had something to give, how do you process something like that? Like if they had something like 16 millimeter film that they wanted to get that would be relative to Sonoma, would you accept things like that? I'm just really curious, and what's the percentage of your budget that goes to that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the History and Genealogy Library, as its name says, it does specialize in local history and then just genealogy resources in general. So they rely, I would say, primarily on donations and gifts from the community, and they have a process to evaluate those. We have a deed of gift form that has to be filled out before those are accepted. We do take a discerning look at the format. So, I mean, in your 16 millimeter example, that it's hard to say that might be a decline, or that might be we'll take it and hopefully down the road we can turn it into another more user-friendly format for today. We also have a small allocation in the materials budget for each of our special collections. So the History and Genealogy does buy new materials each year. So they don't just have older things in their collection or donated things in their collection. They also have, recently published materials, how-to guides, and this kind of thing on genealogy, for example.
And I just to ask, so someone contributes a bunch of old photographs, for example, but they need to be processed. And there's an expense to that. Is that something you send out? Is that something the library does? 60 millimeter film. Do you go and you want to digitize that? Is that something you have a budget for to do something like that?
Yeah, so at this library, we have never had a preservation or digitization budget per se.
Okay.
We have relied on grants or partnerships in the community. We do have several vendors that we work with where we could send something out like that if we had the funds to do so. In the past, we've worked, for example, with like the Sonoma County Bar Association or the City of Santa Rosa when they had materials in their Luther Burbank Home and Gardens collection that they wanted our help with to digitize and make available to a wider audience. They paid us to do that work, so there was no cost to the library, and we were able to assist in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we have historically handled it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Back to you, Anne.
Jamie, who's the next? Looks like Dave Tacheva with Facilities is the next presenter.
Yes, it's Dave.
Oh, thank you, Anne. Hello, Madam Chair, Commission members. I'm Dave Tacheva, Facilities Manager. I'm honored to be here today presenting at the budget workshop. Next slide, please. The Facilities Division is focused on the efficient and effective delivery of logistics and other support services related to real property. Our work encompasses multiple controls to ensure functionality, comfort, safety, and efficiency of the built environment by integrating people, places, processes, and technology. Our key facilities people are called building mechanics for a good reason. Modern public buildings are a complex set of interconnected systems. By keeping our buildings at peak efficiency, we provide safe and comfortable environments with clean water, sanitary sewer, efficient storm drainage, abundant electrical and data, heating and cooling, clean air, and much more. Delivery services is another department I oversee, is a fundamental component of our library service model. It involves a wide range of transport, sorting, and distribution of library and other materials. We specialize in delivering these materials from point of origin or storage to their lending or destination point as efficiently as possible. Most of what we deliver is in service, shortening hold times for patrons. Next slide, please. For people, we have 15 staff members devoted to facilities maintenance and delivery. It says 12 on the slide there, but I believe it's 15. It's 12 FTE, 15 actual people. So you can see that's slightly lower this year. Again, that's due to the reduction in benefits. And not a reduction, but the recalibration. It's the actual costs for benefits. For places, we manage over 250,000 square feet of building space. We manage small projects and large branch refreshes, working with our own skilled team and a variety of outside contractors. For resources, we have a tremendous amount of resources that we draw upon. Probably one of the largest in the system, aside from payroll. We supply PPEs, cleaning materials, restroom supplies, and much more. Next slide, please. What's new this year? Well, we're finding better ways to help our locations with the creation of small projects team. So throughout the year, we get many requests for branches to replace a workstation here, a workstation there, all of which has been kind of like kind of stumble upon where we're going to get the money for this. So we've created with Marina, we've created this maintenance fund that will help us pay for that kind of stuff, and we don't have to shuffle money around so much anymore. This allows us to provide the needed support while our priorities pivot and evolve. Places, calibrating with our county, city partners, ensuring we understand the potential impact of our and their decisions on the provision of space, services, cost, and risk. So our facilities master plan is really going to provide us with a list of priorities and timelines for those priorities to allow us to engage with our county city partners on a more effective level. Resources, investing in a sustainable future by providing dedicated funding, thus ensuring a welcoming and cost-effective environment that encourages public service staff to feel comfortable and supported as they in turn support our library patrons. Next slide, please. What's new this year in delivery? So we have adapted in the past year to the automated materials handling system, and we are cross-training staff to handle both sorting and driving. This minimizes our downtime and supports our on-time daily delivery. Places. We are modernizing our processing methods to ensure a consistent, predictable stream of materials. So we've evolved our delivery team into 4 routes from 2 over the past few years. We are getting all our materials to our locations before we open, which is a huge goal of ours the last year or so, and we're going to continue to do that as we open them to the public. Resources is our ability to move and organize over 5,000 items a day. And that's only the beginning of its potential. Planning a future of reasonable and consistent expansion of these assets is likely our next step. Next slide, please. Goals and reimagining. On Monday, September 13, 2021, Sonoma County Library Administration, along with staff, local officials, and community members, celebrated the ribbon cutting of the Roseland Regional Library, a long-awaited community asset, which was designed beautifully to reflect and serve the diverse South San Jose community of Roseland. The small but beautiful branch is fully ADA compliant in an LEED building. Sonoma County Archives. In this current fiscal year, in collaboration with the County of Sonoma, Sonoma County Library staff were able to relocate the county archives out of the fire-prone area of Los Gilicos to a more modern structure in the northeast of the area. Support services. These achievements have been made possible by insisting that accessibility and equity be a part of our planning process. With the dedicated and devoted support services staff, we are able to support every library location, transform new and old spaces to suit our ever-growing needs. Next slide, please. Measure Y impacts. Facilities master plan. So we're really excited about this plan to be published soon. I'll give you a quick overview of what it's going to do. It's time to prioritize the capital funding program. Facilities is making up for lost time with contemporary financial funding and planning. Capital Improvement Fund will allow us to the freedom to plan $65 to $100 million worth of modernizing, relocating, and redeveloping new locations over the next decade. And you can see with that amount of money needed, how much we need Craig and his team to be fundraising for these improvements. With the strategies outlined in our almost complete facilities master plan, we can continue with this reasonable action. With active promotion, publicity, staffing, and volunteer development, modernizing spaces for our active children's program, developing English as a second language classrooms, creating special collection areas for books in many languages, and expanding our library support center, we will add to the growing sense of ownership in the communities we serve. Next slide, please. All right, that's a lot. So I'm sure I'll have a few questions here. Thank you everyone for listening. Barbara, I see your hand up first.
Thanks, Dave, for all you do. It's a tremendous undertaking. Keep all of our libraries, many of them are very old and pretty, we know. But anyway, appreciate all that you do. Your team is very busy. I wonder two quick things. One is if you could give us an update on the impact as you see it of the automatic handling machinery or equipment that we're using now. And also if you could update us, and especially in the public sphere here, about COVID and what kind of maybe air purification systems or whatever else you've done to keep the community safe. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for those questions. So AMH we're just scratching the surface of its potential, of what it can do, but what its immediate impact has been is it has allowed delivery to do these 4 routes and get the materials there before we open to the public, so that holds and things can actually be ready to get to the patrons the day they get delivered to the branch. Before, that was only it could only happen at a few branches because we would get to a few before we opened and then we get to a few after we opened. But now we're getting all these 5,000 materials a day to the locations before they open on the day. It's marvelous. So the goal in there and what we keep striving for is 1 day turnover. Nothing sits in there longer than 24 hours. Comes in and it goes out. The other question is a little more complicated, but what we're doing, and one of the projects coming up this next year is air purifiers that attach to the wall in the staff areas. We're almost completing this air purifier system in the public area. That'll be completed by the end of this fiscal year, that part of this project. So it's that also has these units have a sensor in them that tells the staff what the air quality is as far as the AQI number goes. There's a preventative maintenance with them, changing the filter after so many hours of use. They're energy efficient because they're motion sensitive, so when somebody's not in the area, they're not going to be on. That's what we're doing immediately. Of course, when this COVID all began, we put the highest level of filtration we could in all of our air handling systems without jeopardizing those systems. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Dave. I guess I didn't even know about the air purification system. So that's something that's in process right now and in place in some of the libraries, but not all. Is that?
That's correct. That's correct. We started with the smaller regional branches because, well, they seem to be a little more older, and their HVAC systems were a little older too. So we felt the need was a little greater there, and we're moving to the bigger ones. And specifically, next fiscal year, we're going to implement what's called an air curtain, also to help with keeping outside air outside. Andy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do. Dave, first of all, thanks to you. Thanks to you for a great presentation. Thanks to your team for all the great work you're doing. I had a question. You alluded earlier to the automated materials handling system, and I'm figuring that you probably know better than anybody the direct impact of that. Could you talk to that just a little bit? I know we made a pretty significant investment in that a while back. What is the kind of impact on the day-to-day operation of the library?
Well, on the day-to-day, it allows us to process 5,000 materials each day with less repetitive motions. It also allows us to get those materials to the branch locations before they open on Monday through Friday. That gets the holds on the shelves a lot sooner than we could in the past. Mike is the technical part behind AMH, so there's a lot of efficiencies that it does for him and for collection services that's outside my scope of expertise. I see that he's raised his hand, and he's probably got a lot more to add than what I have. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm quite proud of the AMH. It is an amazing piece of machinery and the technology behind it. So in the sorting process, it's just setting a book or a material down on the tray, and it takes it to the route where it's going to the buckets. That's only the first part, and getting the books to the branch is only the first part. Where the general staff see the biggest benefit is with the tote check-in service aspect of it. So in past times, each library staff, when they get the materials, that they would have to manually check each item in. As you can see, just by the way I'm using my hand, that's very repetitive in its motion. With the tote check-in service, with one barcode, they check in up to 25, even 30 items all at once. And what that does is they go straight from that tote check-in to the sorting carts to be reshelved or directly out to the hold shelves. For example, I think in Roanoke Park, they actually put the hold totes near the hold shelves so they can go out there, write down the barcodes, check them in, and in those 4 barcodes, they've checked in 100 items. Check them in, patrons are notified. It's much, 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 much more efficient. Love it.
Thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thanks very much.
Okay, well, next I'm going to introduce Mike. Mike is our IT manager, and he's presenting to you next.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mike Daw. I'm the IT manager for the Sonoma County Library. Interestingly, today is my 19th anniversary as a California resident. I actually moved here for this job. I began working for the Sonoma County Library on April 7th, 2003. It's a long time. A lot has changed. What hasn't changed is we're a support department that really focuses on providing services, making our resources and programming and everything possible for the library. I often tell my staff we're the glue that holds the system together. A bit of an overstatement, but we have our fingers in a lot of different aspects of it. Next slide. IT has 10, soon to be 11, highly trained individuals in 7 different specialized fields supporting the infrastructure for the Sonoma County Library. Infrastructure itself is a huge word, and it's got a very broad scope. First and foremost, we support the Scenic fiber optic network that provides all the communication possible so that we can support over 3,000 computers and devices used by both the public and the staff. Additionally, we support the integrated library system Horizon, which manages the Sonoma County's copious collections for both discovery and circulation to our library patrons. We also support both the public and the staff websites. All told, in the last 12 months, we've actually completed over 5,000 technical support help tickets. Next slide, please. Again, we support and develop technology used by all library users. Everybody that comes to the library, works in the library, is our customers. So I want to go over a few of our highest profile, most prominent project over the last year. First and foremost, you see the image on the right-hand side of this slide. That's the new website. The next generation website debuting later this year is going to be the first major overhaul in 5+ years. I'm quite excited about it. It's focusing on active language, dynamic imagery designed to really draw users into our resources. It's going to be, it's wonderful. Moreover, we have the Sonomafy Internet Access project, where we provide over 1,000 internet devices lending out to the public so that they can have internet access in places where it might not be available, or they might not be monetarily able to get internet access on their own resources. Also, with the Wi-Fi, we provide public Wi-Fi in all of our regional and Occidental and Forestville libraries. In the last year, we had over 210,000 unique sessions where people were making use of our resources to access the internet. Now, this last 2 years, we've really gone through some changes with the pandemic, and we've had a lot of closures. So we actually focused on adding external Wi-Fi at all of our libraries. so that now, whether we're open or closed, we're always providing internet access to our public. For example, at Windsor, with the town green, we have antennas that'll give you Wi-Fi access on the other side of the lawn. It's great, whether you're on the grass, in your car, in a park, by the buildings, we're providing access to resources on your hours and their hours, not just ours. Also, we have the Sonoma-Fi. I did that one already, excuse me. We're adding ADA access at our branches. This last year, we worked with a local company, Sterling Adaptives, to provide high visibility workstations with special screen reading software and specialized keyboards for people that might have visual impaired users, so that they have access to our internet and electronic resources. Moreover, we deployed high-end book readers at all of our libraries, so that people that want to make use of our print readers can do so much more easily with their vision. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have 11 people working in IT soon. And you'll notice, just like everybody else, our dollars dropped a little bit and going into 22, 23 at $1,579,633. Places is where we do our capital improvements, whether that be wiring for a refresh project, AV upgrades for our media rooms, branch refresh projects, large scale project servers, anything over the $5,000. For that, we have $619,006 in our budget this year. And then in resources, that's everything else, public computers, iPads, printers, supplies, everything that we provide so that the libraries can provide technology use to our community. In that line, we have $2,545,486 for a total of $4,744,125 for the IT division. And next slide, please. So what's new this year? With the additional FTE person that we're adding into our department, we're redefining how we are doing our work. We're adding new flexibility, skills, and efficiencies to roll out new projects and also maintain the current projects being maintained within the library system. This year, we're also going to be rolling out a new flavor of the Sonoma-Fi project. Through a joint funded project with a grant with Measure Y and the IMLS, we're adding the Sonoma-Fi internet pop-ups into our libraries. You might think of these as the first responder networking kits that people can take into the field to provide broadband access. With these kits, we're going to be deploying to provide internet access to off-site events so that we can get out into our communities at a variety of venues and do instructional sessions, help people sign up for resources, even do Ask a Librarian and other resources that we're doing anywhere in Sonoma County. Another big project is the Automated Book Lockers project. Soon we'll be adding our first automated book locker in Sonoma Valley, with 2 more additionally being rolled out in fiscal year 2023. Technology changes very rapidly and in continuous fashion. IT continually upgrades and innovates our systems for an improved access of technology for all library users. Next slide, please. Again, the automated book lockers, I'm quite happy about, and I'm excited to have the first one being deployed in the Sonoma Valley later this year in June. Not only do they expand library technology, they also fit within the Reimagining Plan concept of considering capital improvements to support curbside and outdoor resources. The automated book lockers allow us to provide library holds pickup on the user's schedule, not just when we're open. So for example, a commuting parent that needs to swing by and pick up their holds for the nightly story times. This is new, but every night we read picture books to Sailor before he goes to bed. Now we can provide that same level of resource for somebody that might be commuting out of our area. They can swing by whenever they need to, Or if somebody's not fully comfortable coming into our buildings, they now have the opportunity and the ability to pick up their holds materials without having to come into the library. The automated book lockers provide access to our materials outside of our walls, providing additional access to our resources. Next slide, please. And then what other project in IT exemplifies Measure Y than the Sonoma 5 project? Sonoma 5 is a hugely popular and greatly needed project in our community. Sonoma County is one of the biggest and most encompassing hotspot programs that I've encountered in my research. Through our efforts, we provide internet to people that may not otherwise have access. Sonoma County extends the library's reach to underserved communities, supports educational programs, and expands access to our digital collections wherever the people may be. This image right here really showcases that, where you have multiple people connecting on multiple devices in their own home, whether that be for homework help, getting a recipe for tonight's dinner, or even learning to read on a tablet. Next slide, please. With that, I really ran through that. There's a lot of what we do in the IT, and I really do feel that we're the glue that helps to provide resources to everybody that we work for, staff and public alike. With that, if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Love your enthusiasm. Commissioner Elkin.
Yeah, I do too. Mike, thanks for a great presentation. Particularly loved hearing about what you're doing kind of under the umbrella of greater outreach to our patrons with things like the pop-ups and the automated book lockers, and of course, Sonomify. I'm wondering if you could maybe just take a moment to share with us the latest information and perspective you have on the digital divide in Sonoma County. What's the current state of the need that we, among others, are trying to address in this area?
Well, as a parent, and I know there are other parents on this call, having the schools closed down and having shelter in place and really being sheltered apart from popular institutions and schools, the digital divide has become more apparent than ever. We've been talking about the digital divide since the 90s, and maybe even prior to that, and it's really never popped up before now. When the pandemic popped up 2 years ago and we shut the library doors, we really shut off access to a lot of people. And so with Sonomify, we're able to provide access to more than those that are able to come in the library. In addition, the external Wi-Fi project was another example of providing access. Without internet access, people don't have the same level of information is key for all things. And without having access to the internet, it really is taking away people's educational access. And so with the Sonomify project, if anything, we're going to try to continue to expand it and capitalize on its use to provide more and more access for those that may not be able to come into our buildings or into a institution that might have it otherwise.
You know, I great to hear that, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious because I've seen, or I recall that I've seen figures that are just amazing about the percentage of people in Sonoma who do not have high-speed internet access still. Mm-hmm. What's the latest that you've seen on that?
Sarah is a great person with numbers, and I see she popped up her hand. So okay, Sarah, do you have some of that?
Yeah, just jumping in as the librarian here. I was going to share the new portrait of Sonoma County, which came out just a month or so ago. It doesn't dig deep into this, but it does point out that in Sonoma County, 28% of our students from English-speaking backgrounds have limited or no internet access, and about 37% of English language learners have little to no internet access. So I feel that those are pretty outstanding, stunning numbers in a community that's, obviously so well connected in many other ways. So looking at that need for our students in particular, and then seeing how that would expand to their family members and others.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Barbara?
Thanks very much, Mike. Always a ton of stuff going on in your department and lots of responsibility. Appreciate everything you all are doing. Two quick questions from the ADA side. Can you verify that all of our forum/Flores/community rooms and all of our libraries have been updated for hearing support?
Correct. They all have listen loop equipment installed in all of them. Yes.
They do. Thank you. And the other question is about the automated book lockers, which look fabulous. I'm a little bit surprised. Is this a pilot program just to this one thing in Sonoma Valley? It seemed like something that might have come before the commission as a bigger project.
It's not a pilot program. We're starting to, it fits within the reimagining plan of extending our access outwards beyond our buildings. And so we're starting this fiscal year with the first locker in Sonoma Valley. The reason why that was chosen was it was a perfect, given the time frame, a perfect location because they have that nice covered patio to keep it sheltered from the weather, but we're hoping to expand them at all regional libraries across the system, and additionally to strategically placed lockers offsite as well. So this specific project per se didn't come past the commission, but it is directly seated within the reimagining plan.
So possibly we could get a fuller report, especially you're talking about non-library locations for this also?
Potentially. That would be down the road. That would not be before the libraries had them on sites, though, I don't believe. Erica, if you had anything to add to that, I'd feel free.
Sorry. What was the question?
Oh, Barbara was inquiring about the deployment of the automated book lockers. I stated that we're going branch by branch, and we'll be installing two book lockers at a minimum per fiscal year in the future, and then moving to potentially strategically off-site locations. And just if you had anything to add to that.
It depends. So our implementation of this really depends upon funding as well as internet access, because we need to have it has to hook up to our library catalog. So we're looking at locations first that have the physical attributes that would be suited to this. So Sonoma Valley was chosen because of that patio. But we're also, as we, look at some of our service areas where we don't have library service, such as, West County along the coast, what we need to identify is how to get, electricity and internet to those locations so that we can expand. Other locations, as we do our refreshes, like Petaluma will be one of our second location for a book locker. And, as we do our refreshes, we will be adding these, rolling these into those projects.
Thank you so much. I think this is kind of like a really big deal, kind of like the bibliobus kind of thing. It'd be really nice to have something, kind of a fuller, more details come before the commission. It sounds like it's going to take, some time to do it, and there's going to be cost involved, like you say, but I for one would appreciate a kind of a full-fledged, plan for this and time frame and cost. So thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
Did I hear my name?
Yes.
Yes, you had your hand up.
So lockers have gone from being something that was kind of interesting to almost standard in many libraries. I know we have ours. I'm just curious, Mike, what brand are the lockers, just out of curiosity?
We're using Lingzo. They're the same company that we're getting our AMH from. They use a manufacturer, I think it's called a Concierge Plus, out of the Midwest. The locker itself is US made. And so it's an 8 to 10 week project. They look spectacular. So there are other California libraries that have lockers at them. That said, we are Linkso's first California customer to implement their product for them. So it's a pretty big deal for their company. They have lockers throughout Washington and Oregon, as well as many in the East Coast as well. So it's a known quantity for them, and it's going to be an exciting project.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks very much. We did talk about this a few years ago. Vicky Tribovich, I think, was voting for the book lockers rather than the bibliobus if there had to be a choice. And we went with the bibliobus. So I'm delighted that this has come back because I think it's really a wonderful project. And my question was going to be, are they all just going to be at library branches, or can we put them elsewhere in the county? And I think that that's terrific. And also I like Commissioner McKenzie, would love to see the plan for that. And I think that that's something that we can really brag about and, and say, and this is what we're using some Measure Y money for. So, and then I also had a question about Sonoma 5. As you were starting to talk about it, I thought, is this the hotspots? Have they named it something else? And then I wondered, as you were describing it, is this allowing, hotspots help families, and I love that, or small businesses or whatever. Is this also going to help library staff take programs out and present? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes. So we have
fabulous. Oh, sorry. Editorial comment.
I agree wholeheartedly. There's a few different flavors of Sonoma 5. There's the hotspots, which anybody can check out currently for 2 weeks. And we're looking at potentially expanding that loan period to 3 weeks. We have some work to do on that. It also is the Chrome kits, which is a hotspot paired with a Chromebook for internet in a box kind of mentality. And then the latest flavor is that Sonoma 5 Pop-Up Your Library. I should mention that that's a joint funded with IMLS and Measure Y. It's an $80,000 project. We're purchasing 15 of those devices. And so each library branch is going to get one, and then we're going to have a few available as floaters as well. The whole idea is to get out amongst the community to do programming where people are, whether that be a retirement community or a school or a farmers market, wherever that we can take our internet and teach from. And additionally, we can provide an internet pop-up that people can connect to for their own resources. They are 100% solely designed for outreach, and it's going to be amazing.
Wonderful. Anne, I can hand it back to you. I would ask for the will of the group, would you like to take a 5 to 10 minute break and then come back?
Thank you.
All right, then I'm seeing no shaking heads. So why don't we get back here at about 3:20? Are we all back? Okay.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Doyle and Commissioners. I am Suzanne Silva, Human Resources Manager, and thank you very much for having me today. I would like to say that we are a very small team of 5 full-time staff and 1 extra help staff in the Human Resources Department. And we've all been here with the library less than 6 years. So since I arrived in 2017, the library staff has increased because of Measure Y funds. We have at least 90 more staff now than before. And we are currently recruiting for 10 vacancies. So my role as manager is to lead the department to meet the goals that contribute to the library's mission and strategic plan objectives, oversee the day-to-day operations of HR for all the staff of the library system. I have spent a great deal of the past 2 years navigating us through the pandemic and protocols with other OMT members. Currently, I serve as the lead for the labor management team, participate in union negotiations, meet and confers, and help the managers navigate through disciplinary actions, coach and counsel them to help improve performance management, and serve as lead for a racial equity team. The other members of my HR team, since we are small, I figured I could tell you about them all. Deanna Katsung is the administrative specialist who assists. She's the right-hand person that keeps us running afloat, schedules meetings and assists with the recruitments, prepares important documents. Kyle O'Neill is our trainer, and he develops and delivers training responsible for coordinating new employee orientations and facilitating other staff development, including staff day. Bianca Malekis, she handles benefits, retirements, leaves, and workers' compensation. These are just very abbreviated overview here. Holley is our extra help employee dedicated to recruitment, and Jen Swenson is our newest member and will be doing recruitment and position control initially, and eventually her duties will grow to class and compensation as we move forward. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about who we are and what we do. In addition to the work I explained on the previous slide, we work with managers to identify methods and resources to recruit and retain and hire qualified employees and staff. We want to prepare them to deliver excellent service to the community by preparing them with training, and that includes excellent customer service, circulation training, and other trainings particular to their specialized duties in the classifications for which they're hired. We administer benefits and wellness resources, including explaining benefits changes, health premiums changes, changes to 457 plans, increases in flexible spending accounts limits. Like in the pandemic, you could increase your amounts. People weren't spending so much on flexible spending, so they were able to decrease their amounts, carry them over. We go through the annual open enrollment process, which we've completely turned into a paperless process. We conduct audits of beneficiaries. Some people don't have beneficiaries. We need them to change their beneficiaries. So we have increased our wellness resources by adding a better EAP, Employee Assistance Program. We provide other statutory trainings like sexual harassment prevention, other management trainings. We try to mitigate the impacts of absenteeism and turnover when it does happen, and it does happen, by maintaining a healthy extra help pool and ensuring that we can get staff to return to work when there are workers' comp injuries as soon as possible. And then we want to provide competitive salaries to retain staff by doing market compensation research to ensure that salaries are competitive with the market. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we have 5 full-time staff and then the 1 extra help. So that's not really counted in our resources. And then places, we don't have a capital budget. And then resources, I'll go over that in a minute, but I noticed that you will see here that our people is probably one of the few that is higher this year than in previous years. Excuse me, and I can explain that because we had, so while benefits decreased in most of the areas, we did not budget for the HRA, which is the health reimbursement account for tier 3 retirees. And then while we budgeted for the OPEB last year, we didn't put in our budget for retiree health. Now those expenses were paid, they just came out of another pot. So now we have them budgeted accordingly. And so they'll be accounted for properly this year. With regards to resources, since we will be doing so much additional hiring, we need to account for background checks, ergonomic evaluations. While they're done for no cost by our workers' comp broker, if there are any additional equipment, keyboards, desks, any type of additional items, those do have a cost associated with them. And then our workers' comp will go up, our workers' compensation premiums will be going up because of some previous claims. And then when our overall payroll increases, the workers' comp premiums will go up. So next slide, please. So what's new this year? As you've heard, we're going to be doing some increased staffing and recruiting to support the Sunday hours. So that's very exciting. I'm sure our patrons are going to be excited about that. We will hire as quickly as we can to meet the needs of our community, but we also want to find quality staff and quality and qualified staff. While we'll be adding additional hours to existing employees, it does take time, and our recruitments don't always go as fast as we plan, but we definitely want to make sure that we meet all those other needs and provide well-trained and excited and enthusiastic staff. Other things that are in our budget is to provide implicit bias and microaggression training. Next slide, please. So to fit with our goals and reimagining plan, we are preparing to issue a request for proposals for a diversity consultant. We want to amplify the work of the racial equity team and provide better engagement with our bilingual community partners and bring those case and results statements to fruition. The racial equity team has also been evaluating the progress of the survey that we did a couple years ago to see what progress we've made and then what areas we still want to address and create a roadmap for success. Additionally, I think I mentioned earlier that providing equitable compensation is a goal to create a happy and successful staff that we can retain. So we have embarked on a classification and compensation study. We've selected a consultant and we'll be moving forward with that contract within the next month. Next slide, please. And then measure why impacts, which is really important, is that we need to continue to develop the pipeline for qualified librarian staff. So we are going to be working with both public services and IT to create an internship program. We'll be using a process that we, a couple of years ago, we worked with PLA, Public Library Association, to have an intern here on site, and it was a very successful internship. And so we want to connect with local high schools and colleges to have students who are interested in doing this work to develop a project and work with those two departments next summer. Hopefully we can get 1 to 3 interns. Next slide. And so that's my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Elkin.
Yes, Suzanne, thanks so much. I'm not sure if this question is most appropriately for you or it is for our CFO, Myrna Lopez, but I'm back on the page that summarizes your budget numbers for the year. And specifically, my question is about people. It seems clear to me that given that you have a staff of 5 or 6, But the number we're seeing there is not just salary and benefits for the HR department. And I don't think I understood what you were saying about HRA accounts and OPEB, but not clear to me why expenses like that would be assigned to your department rather than allocated across the full staffing of the library. Can you address that, or perhaps Myrna can?
I'll let CFO Mir Lopez address that.
Sure. So there are a few items that are department-wide that they normally are not dispersed across divisions. For example, workers' comp. Workers' comp is budgeted under, it has to go somewhere. So it's the best place in the library. It's under HR. It is a benefits matter. And so it's under benefits and under HR. The other is OPEB. OPEB, for example, is also under the benefits, and it's budgeted under HR. The other is the HRA accounts, which are the health reimbursement accounts, and then there's also the retiree, the health retiree premiums. So all of those are not really allocable across the board. It is much easier and efficient and properly administered in one division, and that happens to be HR.
And more specifically, happens to be under what you would consider the people category of HR.
Right. They're benefits, so everything's rolled up under benefits.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yes, this is benefits and salaries, but all those things that I mentioned are under benefits.
So they roll up to HR, but they're not really reflecting the direct expenses of the HR
it's not directly tied to the HR staff.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate the clarification.
Commissioner Ingbarth. Commissioner Ingbarth, your hand is up. Commissioner McKenzie, go for it.
Oh, here we go. I'm unmuted now. I was on mute.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. On the classification and compensation study, I had a question about the scope of the study. Is that going to be similar to the one that was done a couple of years ago, where you're going to be looking at all the positions in the library, or is it a select number of positions?
So generally, when a class and compensation study is done, we will choose all of the positions, but we'll benchmark the positions. So generally, like not the librarian 1, but the librarian 2, so that we can get a position that's got some level of qualifications. As an entry level librarian 1, you know, that's a very entry level. So you want to look at the 2. So there's basically a journey level, requisite level of years and experience. Then
would the study be including the executive part of the library?
Correct. Yes, okay. It includes both.
Okay, Commissioner McKenzie.
Thank you. And thanks, Suzanne, for all you've been doing. I know it's been a totally crazy time, you and your staff, but been dealing with a lot. I had the same reaction that Andy had, a rather startling number under people. And first question, are there any other, because as we've gone through this, my assumption has been division by division. When we're talking about people, we're talking about that staff and their benefits. Are there any other divisions that haven't been that clear cut, that have other stuff in them like this does?
No, not under benefits and salaries. Those are, HR is the only department that carries department-wide expenditures like that.
Okay, then what I'd appreciate when we get to the final, if you're going to redo these slides, is to have a further breakdown so that this one is really reflective in the same way of the people of that department, and then, you know, a separate listing, or, you know, of, you know, what all the other, you know, library-wide costs, because we don't really have a true picture. Yeah, I thought, oh my gosh, 5 people are making $2.5 million. That's a great place to work.
That would be great.
Yeah. So yeah, further breakdown of that would be very helpful. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure, Myrna, correct me if I'm wrong, that also includes our property general liability included in there as well, or no? Yeah, okay.
Thanks. Anybody else have questions? I believe your hand remains up, Commissioner Ingbarth, from before. Okay.
All right, well, thank you. And I will introduce Sarah Vantries, Division Manager of Public Services.
Good afternoon, Chair Doyle, Commissioners. Nice to see you all here today. Jaylene, we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So our Public Services Division offers direct patron services at the 15 different physical locations, and that includes materials lending, research assistance, computer help. Currently, we're offering this for 706 hours per week combined at all our locations countywide. But as you've seen, library services reach far beyond just keeping our buildings open. Our division also coordinates the community engagement that is the real heart of what the library does. So that's events, outreach, mobile library services, volunteers, educational initiatives, the adult literacy program, and then of course, a wide variety of programming for all ages. It's so clear from our presentations today that public services could not accomplish these public-facing activities without the support and hard work and innovation of my colleagues and their departments. So I just want to start by thanking them. In the next slide, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to the Commission our public services leadership team, especially because we have some new faces on the team. Division Manager Barbara Mays and I share overall division oversight, and this is her first week in the role. So we aren't making her present to you, but we look forward to working together to serve the library. Then also new starting this week, Alita Demas is our Adult Services Administrator. Youth Services Administrator Kathy DeWeese and I worked together to prepare the public services budget this year, and I'd also just like to express real gratitude to Kathy for her leadership, especially in community engagement over the past year and a half. Our leadership also includes a public services management team that comprises branch managers, supervising librarians, our literacy services supervisor, and our education initiatives coordinator. Next slide, please. As you can see, our division is people-focused, and we succeed because of our trained and talented workforce. We have about 150 FTE staff, that's over 200 people, including both permanent positions and extra help. As you can see as well, salaries and benefits make up the majority of our division budget, and in this case, you do see an increase from the current year because of those 19 new positions that will be needed for 7-day service at our libraries. We also do budget funds for essential staff development, general supplies, program presenters, and other things that help with our community engagement. And you'll see a slightly higher budget number here as well, primarily because of the return to in-person service and some new opportunities with our literacy services. We actually receive grant revenue from the California State Library Literacy Services Program and other funding sources that make that program possible. And on this budget topic as well, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the contributions of our Friends of the Library group and the other groups, I should say. There are many of them, and also the other private donors who give us funds that further expand our service opportunities. Next slide. So our division priorities for the coming year come straight from the library's Reimagining Plan. Could highlight many of the items on that list, but wanted to mention a few here. So in the coming year, in order to better reach and engage all of our community members, we're going to focus on some staff training that helps us understand different demographics and community needs. In addition, in terms of our spaces, as we move forward from the pandemic and see that kind of evolution of how community uses the library, we're going to be continuing to review and prioritize flexible use of our spaces, as well as flexible offsite services. And in terms of resources, especially with having a full division administration on board, we're looking forward to reviewing and expanding and developing new opportunities that can help multiply the impacts of our community partner expertise and look for new ways to connect library users with social services. Next slide, of course, the headline for our budget this year is Sunday hours. Deputy Director Thibault and others have talked about elements of that, but we really see that as a key way to meet our Reimagining Plan goal to expand access to our community. So our budget, again, includes that increased staffing to provide the personnel needed for that 7th day of service, and that will bring us to 750 hours a week, system-wide, open to the public. Next slide. Well, I'm very, very proud of my division for many things this year, and especially for our staff's creativity and flexibility as we resumed in-person service, adapted services in this changing world. It's really impossible to highlight all the accomplishments, but one of the big ones this year has been getting our Bibliobus out on the road. So that's our new outreach vehicle funded by Measure Y. It allows us to bring library services to communities and locations that don't have easy library access. So far, we visited community events, safe parking sites, Burbank housing locations, the town of Geyserville, and got a lot more on the calendar coming up. We're also right now working on hiring a dedicated staff member who will really help us extend this new core library service. Next slide, please. So Measure Y also calls on public services to maintain children's story times, to provide educational programs, and expand senior and disabled services. I'd say that despite the pandemic, and maybe in some ways because of the pandemic, we've been able to do that in some new ways. For example, this year, we brought early literacy activities to new communities by offering live virtual programs as well as recorded content. We have 8 new Story Walk programs in community parks. We've been partnering with the Santa Rosa Junior College Older Adults program to offer virtual activities for seniors. And some of our new educational programs include the Queer Book Club, the Read BIPOC Book Club, Climate Circle's book discussion series, and these also really further our reimagining goals that will help our visitors feel welcome and build a culture of inclusion in Sonoma County. Next slide. So as you see, our library provides opportunities for our whole Sonoma County community to interact, engage, and contribute. We really help to create that quality of life here. So I'd like to thank you for your time, see what questions we can answer for you, and my colleagues Kathy and Alita may also want to chime in on some of those answers.
I believe Commissioner Engbarth has his hand up. Thank you, Sarah, by the way.
I was just giving a thumbs up, that's all.
No questions for this vibrant section of the budget?
I see Barbara's hand up.
Barbara.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. I've seen you many places over this past period of time, filling a lot of important roles and double role on the public service manager. So I want to thank you again and publicly for all that you've done. Since I've seen you at lab meetings, this is a reminder that we talked about the lab budgets, and I'm not sure this is a point to introduce it, but I'm going to introduce it anyway so I don't forget about it. But in the past, the labs, way back when, didn't have any money, and they would try to do community projects and didn't have any money to work with. Then a prior commission authorized that they would have $500 per lab per year. And that was in place for a few years. And then I think it's just, kind of gotten lost to the wayside. So I would like to add, hopefully that someplace in here in the budget, we can add the $500 back per lab so they can do projects with the community. And I told our lab that I would bring it up, and I wanted to make sure I did. The second thing, I think actually the 2 questions I wanted to ask you are about, could you give us an example of prioritizing spaces and furnishings using flexibility? and also an example of partnerships with social services on site. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, just to speak to the first question, we do continue to maintain that library advisory board budget. I believe that's in our executive services division. And we are looking forward, hopefully this year, public services hopefully can take a lead in helping with that reimagining plan that is about reinvigorating the library advisory boards and helping the boards find ways to use that funding to really gather community feedback and turn outward in helping provide the commission information from their communities. Your other questions, so some examples with spaces and furnishings. Obviously, when we first reopened to the public, we were had to open at limited capacity based on the health order. And so in many cases, that gave us an opportunity to kind of take stuff out. We didn't want to have too many seats in the library because then it's crowded, but we won't have very many people. And so as we are moving those things back and thinking about new ways to arrange furniture, looking at how we can use outdoor spaces. There's a big crossover here, of course, working with Dave Tacheva and his division. An example of an upcoming project that's donor funded is to make some updates in our Cloverdale courtyard that will make it a better space for programs and activities. And I think those are the kinds of projects that we'd like to look at other locations where that's would be possible. Another element of that flexibility is really more of a policy question than a budget question. For example, the way we were able to update our meeting room policy this year that will allow us to have outside users beyond library hours. So we have some efficiency there where we don't have to have staff monitoring those activities, but that really opens up a really useful resource in many of our communities. And again, that's possible because of the work of IT and facilities to give us the infrastructure to do that. To your question about working with community partners to share their services or bring their services on site, one of the first tasks that is on our Adult Services Administrator, Alita Demas's list, is to work with the county job link board and look at how we can bring job link navigators to our library. They are they work with a number of organizations that provide job skills and job seeking assistance, but they are physically based in Santa Rosa. And so they have approached us to see if they would be able to bring their staff on site to serve community members in areas like Guerneville and Petaluma and Sonoma Valley. So a good example, again, of how we flexibly use our space, bring the expertise of others on site. Our staff don't have to know all the ins and outs of, all these different programs that help people find jobs, but we can provide that space, the Wi-Fi, and the opportunity for our community members to access that without having to travel.
I hope that as these further social services unfold, I'm sure you're going to let us know. But the kind of thing, as somebody was saying earlier, I think Deborah, the kind of things that we can brag about and talk about when we go out and talk in the community, this is the kind of thing that might be just, we need to know about it so we can talk about it. So as you make these connections, we'll be appreciative of the details. Thank you.
We'd also like to welcome aboard your new staff members, not all new to the organization, but new to the department. I think it sounds like it's going to be fabulous. Really, we look forward to it. Programming and outreach has always been something that this library, even when it didn't have a whole lot of money, was very good at community outreach and community engagement. And so it's wonderful to see what talented staff can do with a sensible budget like that. Also, I was glad to hear you mention programs for the aged, not because of anybody who's on the call now, of course, but when I was at the Public Library Association meeting last week, there were a couple of very interesting programs for the aging, for the aged, and I think libraries are looking at them a little bit differently now, and so I think it'd be very interesting to see what the future of programming for the aged looks like, because there are going to be so many of us in a few years. Any other questions? Again, thanks very much, Sarah.
Right, and we're bringing it full circle. Turn it back over to CFO Lopez.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, nice to see you again. I will be presenting for the Budget and Finance Division, and we could do the next slide, please. Who we are and what we do. The Budget and Finance Division provides oversight of all financial activities, accounting, purchasing, auditing, payroll, and financial reporting. We develop the annual budget, direct forecasts of revenues and expenditures, develop and implement policies and procedures to manage all funds, including Measure Y, and provide staff support for the Commission Finance Committee and the Measure Y Oversight Committee. The Budget and Finance Committee team consists of 6 people for the cost of $723,428, which shows the decrease in benefits. Under resources, the resources that are budgeted are for accounting resources to remain on schedule with our fiscal requirements. As you can see, there is a decrease there of a savings of $195,000, which reflects actual spending levels. And so I trued up the budget there for the department. Next slide. What's new this year? Well, we will continue to work towards continued excellence and customer service, support the capital improvement program with improved procedures, and monitor the budget to maintain funding levels needed to support existing programs, staffing, and service levels. Next slide. Our division also supports the Reimagining Plan by continuing to exercise fiscally sound policies and procedures to maintain a sustainable budget and continue to build on the vision for the Reimagining Plan. Next slide. For Measure Y, we will continue to ensure adherence to the Measure Y ordinance and the expenditure plan and continue to support the Measure Y Oversight Committee. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions.
Commissioner Elkin.
Yes, thanks very much, Marina, to you and your team. What a difference since you've come on board, and really grateful. I just wanted to clarify something that I thought I heard you say. I know that when you did join the library, Randy Seipel and his team from the county were providing support, particularly in terms of our monthly reporting. Is the plan that that's going to continue for some time? Would you just talk a little bit about how you see either continuing or phasing out those services?
The county accounting services group is very valuable. They are doing the monthly reports and other support services. They supported the audit, for example. How the library benefits from that is 3 individuals that are accounting experts and specialists, including very experienced individuals that have government experience. And so the library has benefited from that, and I see a continued benefit working and partnering with Randy Seipel's group. It is very common to see other JPAs and special districts partner closely with the county accounting services group, precisely because they offer specialized accounting services that benefit smaller organizations that are full service, and it is a cost benefit to the JPAs and special districts. So at this time, I have continued to incorporate their services, and we'll evaluate it on an annual basis, but they continue to be of much value added.
Well, I think they've been doing a great job, and certainly I think we owe them some of the credit for helping you bring the audits up to date and just keeping everything running smoothly. So just curious about that. That's great. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Okay.
This has really been very, very helpful. Usually we're down in the weeds and have lots and lots of questions. So we really appreciate your very thoughtful presentation, all of you, to staff, and also thank you, commissioners, for reading it very carefully and having questions ready as well. Are there any last questions from the commission at this point? And then we can talk about next steps. Okay, so Anne, do you want to walk us through the next steps, or Myrna, would you like to?
Sure, there's the next slide. So just to recap the budget and what it accomplished, it sets out to accomplish in fiscal year 2023 is the addition of Sunday hours at 11 locations made possible by Measure Y, the implementation of the allocation of major revenue sources policy, and the full implementation of the fund balance policy, which is the creation of major maintenance reserves for facilities, IT resources, IT capital, and the vehicle capital replacement reserve. In addition, the overhauling of the capital improvement program reserves, all very important items and best practices. In addition, reducing the operations deficit within the property tax fund through best practices and fiscal efficiencies. So thank you for your support on a lot of these things. Been working very closely with the Finance Committee, in particular, the full implementation of the fund balance policy and the entire Commission's support on the implementation of the new policy for allocating Measure Y and property tax resources. So it's been a pleasure working with all of you and enjoy supporting the library. I'm very honored to serve you all in the library. Then there's a next slide. Just two reminders, I already discussed these, is that the two dates reserved. If there are any open matters that we did say that we would come back with a few things that we can report those to you in May. And then for the budget is, the final budget is scheduled to be considered for approval on June 6th at your regular commission meeting. So at this point, I still take questions. And that would conclude our presentation for today.
Commissioner McKenzie.
Well, thank you so much. I didn't realize that we were not going to go through any of the other pages in our binder. So that's fine. But let me ask a question that are related to something we are talking about under the new Measure Y allocation, the allocation of funds policy. distribution or charging off the expenses. I believe it's 60/40 for public, the service oriented divisions. And I have a question about OPEB. I just would like us to look into that a little more closely, because the OPEB liability has a lot to do with a lot of prior service. And I just don't want to, I just want to make sure that we are not going to cross any lines with Measure Y by paying for any prior service with Measure Y funds. So anyway, if you could just maybe provide us with some more detail about that, about how you've analyzed it, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. So thank you.
Sure. I could provide more analysis on it. OPEB liabilities, yes, they're prior, but they're also current. The OPEB liabilities are overall a liability for the library. So those funds are to be used it's a trust fund that can be used in the future when the library finds itself that at the time that the cost for retiree health is greater than what the library can pay for. And so therefore you tap into the trust fund. So those would be, for, any time during the period for the library. But yes, of course, there's been OPEB liabilities that have been built up over years. But it can be, we haven't been needing to use that trust fund at this time, but sometime in the future we may.
Well, the way we've been looking at it is paying down this large liability rather than having a trust fund set aside to pay off, things that we can't pay for in a current budget. Now, I may be thinking about that incorrectly, but that's the way that we approached it when we had the OPEB committee, looking at this large, at the time, unfunded liability. So anyway, I do understand that it's just kind of a tricky thing. And I know that our Measure Y Oversight Committee will be looking at this. And I just want to be able to, be sure about it.
Okay. I will provide additional information on that.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Cahill.
Yes, I've been unusually quiet today. I read the whole thing. I'm extremely impressed with the presentation. I reviewed the financial stuff in detail, of course, and I'm happy with the thing as it is. So thank you again, Myrna, for this really spectacular program.
Nice to hear.
Thank you.
Commissioner Engbarth.
Yes, along with Dave, I wanted to really extend, my thanks and appreciation to everybody who worked on this. You've done a great job. I'm wondering one thing is, could you perhaps make a list that you can send out to us ahead of the May meeting of the items that you've captured as being open, that are being considered between now and then, so that if we have an opportunity to add on to that list or to identify items on it, we could do so before the May meeting?
Sure. I will shoot to have something by the end of next week.
Thanks.
And I assume we would be talking about those things in the Finance Committee meeting. So if someone wanted to listen in, they probably would be able to hear that. Anything else? Oh, Commissioner Heavenridge.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Myrna and all the staff for working on this. I know it took a lot, and it's nice to have the binder where we can really look at everything. And it was great to have it beforehand to review, as Barbara pointed out. And I think I'm a person that falls asleep when I look at spreadsheets. So Myrna, keep up the charts, please. That helps me a lot. So thanks again.
Thank you.
And I think I probably should ask, even though there's no action items, I should probably ask for any public comment. Are there members of the public in the room? We asked for public comment at the very beginning for things not related to agenda items, but since this is an agenda item, I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. Then that brings us to our adjournment. You all, I'm sure, have the Monday meeting and the location. We're going to be zooming away. But this brings us to adjournment. Or is there any objection to adjourning? Seeing none, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all
everybody.
very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
It was a-
Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.